I can't see, but I can hear an angel. Ray Charles stopped dead in his tracks as he walked through the children's ward at St. Joseph's Hospital in Atlanta, 1962. He had come for a routine check on his recurring headaches, but as he waited for his appointment, the voice was small, fragile, but perfectly in tune as it hummed "Georgia on my mind" from behind a closed hospital room door. What Ray didn't know was that 8-year-old Isabella Mitchell was fighting for her life, waiting for heart surgery that doctors said had only a slim chance of success. Her mother Diana, a widowed seamstress working long hours to afford the mounting medical bills, had no idea that the man standing frozen in the hallway would become her daughter's miracle. But to understand why this chance encounter would save Isabella's life in ways that medicine never could, you need to know about Ray's own struggles with health that brought him to this place, and the decision he was about to make that would change everything. The morning of October 15, 1962 had started like any other for Ray Charles. He was scheduled to perform at the Fox Theater that evening, but the persistent headaches that had been plaguing him for weeks were getting worse. His manager Joe Adams had insisted on the hospital visit, despite Ray's reluctance to see doctors. "Ray, you can't keep performing when you're in pain," Joe had argued that morning at the hotel. "What if something's seriously wrong?" Ray had finally agreed, but only because he trusted Joe's judgment more than his own when it came to health matters. Joseph's Hospital was one of the few medical facilities in Atlanta that treated both black and white patients with equal care, though they still maintained separate waiting areas. Ray's fame afforded him certain privileges, but he never forgot the reality of the world he lived in. Dr. Patricia Whitman, a neurologist who had agreed to see him on short notice, was running behind schedule. "Mr. Charles, I apologize for the delay," the receptionist had said. "Dr. Whitman is dealing with an emergency. Would you mind waiting another 30 minutes? Ray had nodded, but sitting still had never been his strong suit. He decided to take a walk through the hospital corridors, something that always helped him think. That's when he heard it. The voice that would change everything. It was coming from the children's ward, a place Ray had never had reason to visit. The melody was unmistakable, his own composition, "Georgia on my mind," but it was being sung with an emotional depth that surprised him. The voice was young, clearly a child's, but there was something in the way she held the notes that spoke of understanding far beyond her years. Ray followed the sound down the corridor, his white cane tapping softly against the linoleum floor. The singing was coming from room 312. The door was slightly ajar, and Ray could hear not just the child's voice, but the steady beeping of medical equipment. Inside the room, 8-year-old Isabella Mitchell lay in a hospital bed that seemed far too large for her small frame. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was clear and strong as she sang. Connected to various monitors and an IV drip, she seemed oblivious to everything except the music flowing from her lips. Isabella had been born with a congenital heart defect, a condition that had worsened over the years, despite multiple treatments. The surgery scheduled for the following Tuesday was her last hope, a complex procedure that Dr. Robert Harrison, the hospital's leading cardiac surgeon, had described as technically possible, but extremely risky. "Mama," Isabella had asked her mother that morning, "will I still be able to sing after the surgery?" It was the question that had broken Diana Mitchell's heart, because she honestly didn't know. The surgery would either fix Isabella's heart or she couldn't bear to think about the alternative. Diana Mitchell was sitting in the small chair beside Isabella's bed, working on a dress alteration that a customer needed by Friday. Even here in her daughter's hospital room, she couldn't afford to stop working. Since her husband Robert had died in a factory accident 3 years earlier, every dollar mattered. The medical bills were mounting faster than she could pay them, and she was already behind on rent. But none of that mattered when Isabella sang. For those precious minutes, Diana could forget about the bills, the fear, the uncertainty. She could just listen to her daughter's beautiful voice and remember why she fought so hard every single day. Ray Charles stood in the hallway, listening. He had performed for presidents and kings, had sung for crowds of thousands, but he had never heard his song performed with such pure emotion. There was something about this child's voice that reached straight into his soul. "Excuse me," came a soft voice behind him. Ray turned to see a young nurse approaching. "I'm sorry, sir, but visiting hours in the children's ward are restricted." "Are you family?" Nurse Jennifer Hayes had been working at St. Joseph's for 2 years, and while she recognized that this was someone important, his expensive suit and confident bearing made that clear. She had to follow hospital protocol. "I apologize," Ray said quietly. I heard singing, and I couldn't help but listen. That little girl has a remarkable voice." Jennifer's expression softened. She had grown fond of Isabella during her stay at the hospital. "That's Isabella Mitchell. She's been here for 2 weeks, waiting for surgery. She sings all the time. It seems to help her deal with the fear." "What kind of surgery?" Ray asked, though he wasn't sure why he needed to know. "Heart surgery. It's complicated." Jennifer hesitated, then added, "The doctors aren't sure about her chances, but Isabella doesn't know that. She thinks she's just getting fixed so she can go home." Ray was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. "Would it be possible for me to meet her, just for a few minutes?" Jennifer looked uncertain. "Are you family?" "I really can't. My name is Ray Charles," he said simply. Jennifer's eyes widened. She had heard Isabella humming and singing Ray Charles songs constantly since her admission. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "She loves your music. She knows every word to Georgia, on my mind. But I'd have to ask her mother first." Ray nodded. "Of course, I wouldn't want to intrude if they'd prefer privacy." Jennifer knocked gently on the door of room 312. "Mrs. Mitchell? There's someone here who'd like to meet Isabella, if that's all right with you." Diana looked up from her sewing, immediately concerned. "Is it about the surgery? Did something change?" No, Jennifer assured her quickly. It's Ray Charles, the musician. He heard Isabella singing, and asked if he could say hello." Diana's mouth fell open. Isabella, who had been humming quietly, suddenly perked up. "Ray Charles? The real Ray Charles? Mama, is it really him?" Diana couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Isabella had been playing Ray Charles records since she was 5 years old. His music had gotten her through countless doctor visits, hospital stays, and sleepless nights, when the pain was too much to bear. "Can he come in, Mama? Please?" Isabella's voice was stronger than it had been in days. Diana found her voice. "Yes, of course. Please ask him to come in." Ray entered the room slowly, guided by the sound of the child's excited breathing and the beeping of the medical equipment. "Hello there," he said with his characteristic warm smile. "I'm Ray." "I know who you are," Isabella said, her voice filled with joy despite her weakness. "You're Ray Charles. I sing your songs all the time." "So I heard," Ray said, moving closer to her bed. "You've got a beautiful voice, young lady. In fact, I think you sing Georgia on My Mind better than I do." Isabella giggled, a sound that made both Ray and Diana smile. "That's not true, but I love that song. It makes me feel happy even when I'm scared." Ray felt a lump form in his throat. "Scared? What are you scared of, sweetheart?" "The surgery," Isabella said, matter-of-factly. "Mama tries not to show it, but I know she's worried too. The doctors use big words I don't understand, and everyone looks serious when they talk about my heart." Ray sat down in the chair beside her bed, setting his white cane against the wall. "You know what I do when I'm scared?" he asked. "What?" "I make music. I sing or play piano, and somehow the music makes the scared feelings smaller." He paused, then added, "Would you like to make some music with me?" Isabella's eyes lit up. "Really? You'd sing with me?" "I'd be honored to," Ray said. "What song would you like to sing?" Without hesitation, Isabella said, "Georgia on My Mind. It's my favorite." Ray began to hum the melody, and Isabella joined in immediately. Their voices blended beautifully, his deep, soulful tones complementing her clear, sweet soprano. Diana sat transfixed, watching her daughter come alive in a way she hadn't seen since before the latest hospital stay. As they sang together, something remarkable happened. Isabella's voice grew stronger, more confident. The fear that had been etched on her face for days began to fade, replaced by pure joy. Ray could feel it too, the magic that happens when music creates a connection between souls. When the song ended, Isabella clapped her small hands together. "That was the best thing ever. Can we sing another one?" "Of course we can," Ray said. "What else would you like to sing?" For the next hour, Ray Charles gave a private concert in room 312 of St. Joseph's Hospital. They sang, "I Can't Stop Loving You," "Hit the Road Jack," and several gospel songs that Isabella knew from church. Diana watched in amazement as her daughter's color improved and her energy returned. Dr. Harrison, making his evening rounds, stopped outside room 312 when he heard the music. As the hospital's chief cardiac surgeon, he had seen many children face serious operations, but he had never seen anything like this. Isabella Mitchell, who had been listless and anxious for days, was now animated and joyful, singing with one of the most famous musicians in the world. "Nurse Hayes," he called Jennifer over. "What's happening in there?" "Ray Charles is visiting with Isabella Mitchell," Jennifer explained. "He heard her singing his song and asked to meet her. They've been making music together for about an hour." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. He had read studies about music therapy, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. Isabella looked better than she had since her admission. Her vital signs, visible on the monitors connected to her bed, had stabilized in a way that medical intervention alone hadn't achieved. As the evening wore on, Ray realized he had completely forgotten about his own doctor's appointment. His headaches, which had been bothering him all week, seemed to have disappeared entirely. He was so focused on Isabella and their musical collaboration that nothing else mattered. "Mr. Charles," Diana finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Isabella tonight. She hasn't looked this happy in weeks." Ray turned toward Diana's voice. "Ma'am, I should be thanking you. Your daughter has reminded me why I make music in the first place. It's not about the applause or the record sales, it's about moments like this." Isabella yawned, the excitement and music having tired her out. "Mr. Ray, will you come back tomorrow? We could sing some more songs." Ray hesitated. He had a show that evening at the Fox Theater, and his schedule was packed with performances and recording sessions. But looking at this brave little girl, he knew there was no question about his answer. "I'll be here tomorrow," he promised, "and we'll make more music together." Isabella smiled and closed her eyes, drifting off to sleep with a peaceful expression that Diana hadn't seen in weeks. The monitors showed that her heart rate had stabilized at the best levels they'd recorded since her admission. As Ray prepared to leave, Diana walked with him to the door. "Mr. Charles," she said quietly, "Isabella doesn't know how serious her surgery is. The doctors, they've told me there's only about a 40% chance of success." Ray was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Mrs. Mitchell, I've learned that sometimes the most important healing doesn't happen in an operating room. It happens in moments like tonight, when we remember what we're living for." Ray left the hospital that evening with a new purpose. His headaches were gone. His scheduled doctor's appointment forgotten. Instead, he spent the evening on the phone with Joe Adams, rearranging his schedule so he could visit Isabella every day until her surgery. The next morning, Ray arrived at the hospital with his portable keyboard. Word had spread through the hospital about the famous musician who was visiting the little girl in room 312, and several staff members found excuses to walk past Isabella's room to hear the impromptu concerts. Dr. Harrison made it a point to observe these sessions. What he saw fascinated him from a medical perspective. Isabella's vital signs consistently improved when she was singing with Ray. Her appetite returned, she slept better, and her overall demeanor was remarkably positive for a child facing such a serious operation. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Harrison confided to Dr. Whitman, the neurologist who had been scheduled to see Ray. This little girl's entire physiological state has improved since Ray Charles started visiting her. Her body is responding to the music therapy in ways I've never witnessed." Dr. Whitman nodded knowingly. Music has profound effects on the nervous system and overall health. But what Ray is doing isn't just music therapy. It's human connection therapy. That child feels loved and valued in a way that medical care alone can't provide. Over the next 4 days, Ray Charles became a fixture at St. Joseph's Hospital. He would arrive in the morning and spend several hours with Isabella, singing, talking, and helping her stay positive. He brought her small gifts: a toy piano, sheet music written in large print, and books about famous musicians. But more than the gifts, he brought hope. Isabella began to talk about her future, about the songs she would write and perform after her surgery. She talked about traveling the world and making music with Ray Charles on a real stage someday. Diana watched this transformation with wonder and gratitude. Her daughter, who had been withdrawn and fearful, was now talking animatedly about her dreams. The change was so dramatic that other parents in the children's ward began asking Diana about the miracle they had witnessed. "It's not a miracle," Diana would tell them. "It's kindness. It's what happens when someone takes the time to see the person inside the patient." On Sunday evening, the night before Isabella's surgery, Ray stayed later than usual. He could sense the family's anxiety, despite their efforts to stay positive. Isabella had been quieter that day, the reality of the next morning finally settling in. "Mr. Ray," Isabella said as he prepared to leave, "what if I can't sing anymore after the surgery? What if my voice changes?" Ray sat back down beside her bed. This was the question he had been dreading because he knew it was a real possibility. Heart surgery, especially on someone so young, could affect everything about her physical capabilities. "Isabella," he said carefully, "do you know what makes a real musician? Having a good voice?" She guessed. "No, sweetheart. Having a good voice helps, but it's not what makes someone a real musician." Ray paused, choosing his words carefully. "A real musician is someone who has music in their heart, someone who feels the rhythm and melody of life, even when they can't make a sound." Isabella considered this. "So even if I couldn't sing, I could still be a musician?" "Absolutely. You could write songs, play instruments, help other people make music. There are 1,000 ways to be a musician, Isabella. Singing is just one of them." This seemed to comfort her. "Will you still be my friend if I can't sing anymore?" Ray felt tears forming in his eyes. "Isabella, I'll be your friend no matter what happens. We're connected by music now, and that connection doesn't depend on voices or instruments. It's something deeper than that." That night, Ray Charles did something he rarely did. He prayed. He wasn't a conventionally religious man, but something about Isabella had touched a spiritual place in his soul. He prayed for her success, for her healing, and for the strength to help her and Diana through whatever came next. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast. Ray was at the hospital by 6 a.m., even though Isabella's surgery wasn't scheduled until 9. He found Diana in the family waiting room, looking exhausted and terrified. "How are you holding up, Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I'm trying to be strong for Isabella," she replied, her voice shaking. "But I'm so scared, Mr. Charles. What if she doesn't make it through the surgery?" Ray reached over and took her hand. "Diana, may I call you Diana? I want you to know that whatever happens today, Isabella has already won something important. She's experienced joy and friendship and music in ways that will last forever. That little girl has more courage and spirit than most adults I know." Diana squeezed his hand. "Thank you for everything you've done these past few days. Isabella talks about you constantly. You've given her something to fight for." At 8:30, it was time for Isabella to be prepped for surgery. Ray was allowed to see her briefly before she was taken to the operating room. She was drowsy from the pre-surgical medication, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Mr. Ray," she whispered, "will you sing to me while I'm sleeping? Even if I can't hear it, will you sing?" "I'll sing for you the whole time," Ray promised. And when you wake up, we'll make music together again." Isabella smiled and closed her eyes. "Georgia on my mind," she whispered as the orderlies wheeled her bed toward the operating room. Ray Charles spent the next 6 hours in the hospital waiting room, along with Diana and several other family members who had come to support them. True to his promise, he hummed and quietly sang Isabella's favorite songs throughout the morning. Word of the surgery had spread through the hospital, and many staff members found themselves emotionally invested in the outcome. Nurses who had witnessed the transformation in Isabella over the past week checked regularly for updates. Even doctors from other departments stopped by to ask about her progress. Dr. Harrison emerged from surgery at 3:15 in the afternoon. His scrubs were sweat-stained, and his face was exhausted but smiling. The surgery was successful, he announced to the waiting room. Isabella came through beautifully. Her heart is beating strongly on its own, and all her vital signs are stable. Diana burst into tears of relief. Ray felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Around the waiting room, family members and hospital staff celebrated quietly. "When can we see her?" Diana asked. "She'll be in recovery for several more hours," Dr. Harrison explained. "But I expect she'll be awake and alert by this evening." "I have to say, Mrs. Mitchell, Isabella's pre-surgical condition was remarkable. Her positive attitude and strong spirit definitely contributed to the success of the procedure." Ray knew that his visits had played a role in Isabella's improved condition, but he also knew that the real hero was Isabella herself. She had faced her fears with courage and grace that amazed everyone who met her. That evening, Ray was the first person Isabella asked for when she woke up in the recovery room. Her voice was hoarse from the breathing tube that had been used during surgery, but she was alert and eager to see her friend. "Mr. Ray," she whispered when he entered the room. "I can still sing. Listen." She hummed a few bars of "Georgia on My Mind," her voice weak but true. Ray smiled, tears streaming down his face. "That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, Isabella." Isabella's recovery progressed remarkably well. Within a week, she was sitting up in bed, singing along with Ray during their daily music sessions. The improvement in her color and energy was dramatic. The pale, listless child of 2 weeks ago was now vibrant and full of life. Dr. Harrison continued to be amazed by Isabella's progress. "In 30 years of pediatric cardiac surgery," he told his colleagues, "I've never seen such a positive outcome." That little girl's attitude and emotional state clearly contributed to her healing. 2 weeks after the surgery, Isabella was discharged from the hospital. Ray Charles was there to see her off, along with many of the hospital staff who had become attached to her during her stay. "This isn't goodbye," Ray told Isabella as she sat in a wheelchair, ready to go home. "This is just the beginning of our musical friendship." "Will I really see you again?" Isabella asked. "Count on it," Ray promised. "And someday when you're ready, maybe you can come to one of my concerts and sing with me on stage." Isabella's eyes went wide. "Really? In front of all those people? Really, if you want to?" 3 years later, Isabella Mitchell walked onto the stage at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. Now 11 years old and completely recovered from her heart surgery, she had continued to develop her musical talents with Ray Charles's encouragement and support. That night, she performed "Georgia on My Mind" as a duet with Ray Charles in front of 4,500 people. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 5 full minutes. But for Isabella and Ray, the most meaningful performance would always be the one that took place in room 312 of St. Joseph's Hospital, where a scared little girl and a famous musician discovered that music really can heal what medicine alone cannot touch. The friendship that began with a chance encounter in a hospital corridor continued for the rest of Ray Charles's life. Isabella went on to become a music therapist, specializing in working with children facing serious medical challenges. She established the Music Heals Foundation, which brings professional musicians to hospitals around the country to work with young patients. "Ray Charles taught me that music isn't just entertainment, Isabella said in a speech at the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. Music is medicine. Music is hope. Music is the connection between souls that reminds us we're never truly alone. Ray Charles passed away in 2004, but his influence on Isabella's life continued long after his death. At his funeral, she performed "Georgia on My Mind" as part of the tribute, her voice now mature and professionally trained, but still carrying the pure emotion that had first captured Ray's attention in that hospital hallway so many years before. Today, Isabella Mitchell Harrison works at the same hospital where she met Ray Charles, now as the director of their music therapy program. Room 312, where their friendship began, has been renamed the Ray Charles Music Therapy Room, and hundreds of young patients have found healing and hope within its walls. The story of Ray Charles and Isabella Mitchell serves as a reminder that sometimes the most profound healing happens not through medical procedures or medications, but through simple human connection, compassion, and the universal language of music that speaks directly to the soul. But the impact of their meeting extended far beyond one little girl's recovery. Dr. Harrison was so impressed by Isabella's remarkable improvement during Ray's visits that he began documenting the effects of music on his other young patients. His research, published in the American Journal of Pediatric Medicine in 1965, was among the first formal studies to demonstrate the measurable benefits of music therapy for children facing serious medical procedures. What we observed with Isabella Mitchell was unprecedented. Dr. Harrison wrote in his groundbreaking paper, "Her vital signs, pain tolerance, sleep patterns, and overall emotional state improved dramatically during musical interactions." This suggests that music therapy should be considered as a standard component of pediatric medical care, not merely as entertainment. The study caught the attention of medical professionals nationwide, and St. Joseph's Hospital became one of the first medical facilities in the Southeast to establish a formal music therapy program. Within 5 years, similar programs were operating in children's hospitals across the country, all inspired by what had begun as a chance encounter between a famous musician and a brave little girl. Ray Charles himself became an advocate for music therapy, speaking at medical conferences and fundraising events to promote the integration of music into healthcare. He established the Isabella Mitchell Music Therapy Foundation in 1968, which provided funding for music programs in hospitals and training for musicians who wanted to work in medical settings. "Isabella taught me something I never fully understood before," Ray said during the foundation's inaugural event. "Music isn't just my profession, it's a responsibility. When you have the ability to touch people's lives through music, you have an obligation to use that gift to help heal a broken world." The foundation grew to become one of the most influential organizations in the field of music therapy. By the time of Ray's death in 2004, it had funded programs in over 200 hospitals, trained more than 1,000 music therapists, and directly impacted the lives of tens of thousands of young patients facing medical challenges. Isabella's own journey continued to inspire others long after her recovery. As a teenager, she began visiting St. Joseph's Hospital as a volunteer, sharing her story with other young patients and their families. Her message was always the same: hope exists, even in the darkest moments, and healing can come from unexpected sources. "When I was 8 years old, I thought my life was ending," Isabella would tell the children she visited. "I couldn't see past my fear and pain. But then a wonderful man taught me that music lives in our hearts, not just in our voices. He showed me that, as long as we can feel rhythm and melody in our souls, we're never truly broken." Her volunteer work led to a scholarship at Emory University, where she studied both music and psychology. Her senior thesis, "The Neurological Effects of Musical Intervention in Pediatric Patients," expanded on Dr. Harrison's original research and became required reading in music therapy programs nationwide. After graduation, Isabella was offered a position at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, where she helped establish one of the most comprehensive music therapy programs in the country. But her heart remained in Atlanta, and she eventually returned to St. Joseph's Hospital, where her own healing journey had begun. As the director of music therapy at St. Joseph's, Isabella oversaw a program that served more than 500 young patients annually. Her team of 12 full-time music therapists worked throughout the hospital, from the neonatal intensive care unit to the adolescent oncology ward, bringing hope and healing through the universal language of music. Every child we work with teaches us something new about the power of music to heal, Isabella reflected during a staff meeting in 2003. Some respond to rhythm, others to melody. Some find comfort in familiar songs, while others are inspired by creating something entirely new. But they all remind us that music touches something deeper than medicine alone can reach. The program's success attracted attention from around the world. Medical delegations from Europe, Asia, and South America visited St. Joseph's to study their methods and implement similar programs in their own countries. Isabella found herself traveling internationally as a consultant, helping hospitals worldwide establish music therapy programs based on the model that had grown from her own experience as a patient. Diana Mitchell, Isabella's mother, lived to see her daughter's remarkable career unfold. She often spoke about that pivotal week in 1962, when Ray Charles entered their lives, transforming what could have been a tragedy into the beginning of a life dedicated to healing others. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Ray hadn't been walking down that hallway that day. Diana mused during Isabella's wedding in 1985. But then I realized that people like Ray and Isabella find each other because they're meant to. The universe has a way of bringing together the people who need each other most. The wedding itself was a testament to the power of music to create lasting bonds. Ray Charles performed "Georgia on My Mind" as Isabella and her new husband, Dr. Michael Harrison, Dr. Robert Harrison's son, who had followed his father into pediatric cardiology, had their first dance. The moment came full circle. The song that had first connected a scared little girl and a famous musician now celebrated the beginning of a new chapter in a life dedicated to healing. Ray's health began to decline in the late 1990s, but he never stopped supporting Isabella's work. When he could no longer travel, he participated in hospital events via video conference, singing with young patients and encouraging their families. His presence, even through a screen, brought the same joy and hope that had first transformed Isabella's hospital experience decades earlier. In his final interview, conducted just months before his death in 2004, Ray Charles reflected on the relationship that had meant so much to both him and Isabella. "People always ask me about my greatest performances," he said, his voice still strong despite his frail appearance. "They expect me to talk about concerts or recordings or famous collaborations, but I tell them the truth. My greatest performance was singing with a little girl in a hospital room in 1962. That's when I learned what music is really for." Isabella was among the speakers at Ray's funeral, her voice carrying the same pure emotion that had first captured his attention 42 years earlier. "Ray Charles saved my life," she told the gathered mourners, "but not in the way people might think. He didn't cure my heart condition. The doctors did that. What Ray cured was my fear. He showed me that I wasn't alone, that music could be a bridge between souls, and that healing happens when we open our hearts to each other." Today, the Ray Charles Music Therapy Wing at St. Joseph's Hospital serves as a living memorial to the friendship that changed the world of pediatric medicine. The wing houses 12 therapy rooms, each equipped with various instruments and recording equipment, allowing young patients to explore music in whatever way speaks to them most powerfully. Room 312, where Ray and Isabella first met, remains the centerpiece of the program. Now called the Isabella Mitchell Healing Room, it has been renovated to include a small performance space where patients can share their musical creations with family members and staff. The walls are covered with photos from the program's 50-year history, including many pictures of Ray Charles with young patients from his decades of hospital visits. On the anniversary of their first meeting each year, October 15th, the hospital holds a special concert featuring current patients, former patients who have recovered, and professional musicians who volunteer with the program. Isabella, now in her 70s, still attends these events, often performing "Georgia on My Mind," to honor the memory of the man who taught her that music really can heal what medicine alone cannot touch. The legacy of that chance encounter continues to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that Ray and Isabella could never have imagined. Medical schools now routinely include courses on music therapy in their curricula. Hospitals worldwide have adopted music therapy as a standard component of pediatric care, and thousands of children who might otherwise have faced their medical challenges alone have found hope, healing, and friendship through the power of music. The story reminds us that miracles don't always look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they come in the form of a famous musician who takes time to listen to a frightened child. Sometimes they appear as a little girl whose courage inspires everyone around her. And sometimes they emerge from the simple act of two people making music together, proving that the most powerful medicine isn't found in a pharmacy. It's found in the connections we make with each other when we're brave enough to open our hearts and share our gifts with the world.